Welcome back to another episode of the Media Pass. I'm your host, Alex, with my other host, Matt. Matt, how you doing?
Pretty good. As we record this, not as we physically record this, it's like a long story, but I'm actually technically in the middle of a patent law exam. So I'm as good as somebody who can be in that situation can be. But yeah, that's basically where I'm at. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing good. It's Friday. It's been a long week. I'm going to talk about it once we kind of get into the meat of the episode, but I've been working on a video about a certain player who we'll get to. And when I first start, normally when I make a video, like it's pretty straightforward. I can just I've watched enough games that I'm like, okay, I know exactly what I'm going to talk about. I have like the numbers to kind of describe what I'm going to be talking about. And it's a very straightforward process most of the time. But for some reason, this video, well, I know the reason why. It's not like just for some enigmatic reason. It's there's a good reason why it's taken so long. But I dove into this video and it's taken way longer than it normally does for me to make a video, which has been frustrating, but also like there's a fulfilling part of that where it's like, oh, cool. I'm like really in the trenches on this. So we'll kind of talk about that once we get into what we're going to be doing. Why don't you go ahead and explain what we're going to be doing today?
Yeah. So basically, okay, we're going to be talking about some guys and let's backtrack real quickly. Okay. When I say like casual fans, I'm usually referring to my dad because he's like my most, he's the most exposure I get to kind of that realm of society, right? And my dad, in his mind, and I think this is true a lot of casual fans, he thinks like there's only like really 25, 50 guys that move the needle for NBA title odds, right? And he's right to an extent, but every year, like there's like the great teams, like we have like the Denver Nuggets, Boston Celtics. We talked about this last episode. Those two teams for sure put them in pen title contenders. And then we have then we talked about like 10 teams that could be title contenders depending on how things break for them. They're like really good teams. And what most of them have in common is they have like four guys who are really good on both sides of the ball. You trust them in a playoff series, right? And then whoever that fifth guy they trot on the floor is usually what loses them the series, right? They usually get exploited in some manner, whether it be on defense, on offense. And that's what ends up being the difference between them winning one playoff series and then winning 3 playoff series. I don't know, right?
Yeah.
But every year there's also like this one guy who's like maybe a starter caliber level basketball player, maybe like a good 7th man, 6th man, but in his team context, he does something or he does something to make the rest of it work, right? Those other 4 guys find their 5th guy, and those 5 guys are the sum of them is larger than the individual parts, right? So like this guy on his own is, again, like if we ranked all 450 players, he'd probably not even be in the top 100. Maybe some of these guys we're talking about would be, right? But in his specific team context, he could be the difference between them winning 1 series and 3 series. And that's just kind of how basketball works. So what we're doing today is I picked 3 guys that could be that guy this year, and Alex picked 3 guys that could be that guy this year. So that is what we're going to do.
So why don't you go ahead and kick it off with the first player that you want to talk about, and we can get a sense of kind of the level of players that we're talking about.
Yeah. So the first guy I'm going to talk about, and hate to start the pod with, our anti-Bucks agenda.
It's a tradition at this point.
Yeah, it's a tradition. But I wrote about him 2 days ago, MarJon Beauchamp. So the Bucks, the more I watch them, the more I realize that they're very bad on defense. Very bad. But it's not because of Brook Lopez and Giannis Antetokounmpo, although Giannis does have a couple of questionable off-ball breakdowns. But both of them are still like very, very, very good rim protectors. I remember on the first episode we did of this show, I made a comment that Brook looked like he'd slowed down a little bit. Completely wrong. Completely wrong.
I agreed with you. I was like, yeah, you're right.
He looks awesome. So they have great rim protection. But I actually recently just did a study. Last Monday it came out where I like, and this is a big side note, but I looked at all the top 10 defenses since 2003, 2004. And out of the three major categories of defense, right? Point of attack defense, which is like, on ball traditional defense, defensive playmaking, which is turnover creation, and rim protection. The most prevalent feature of all the good defenses of the last 20 years was that they were good point of attack defenses. 136 out of the 210 teams I looked at were top 10 in opponent assists allowed per 100 possessions, which is probably like the best team indicator we have of point of attack defense. So basically all of that is to say, like, good defenses usually have good point of attack defense. The Bucks have a strong case, and I mean this, as the worst point of attack defense in the entire NBA, even with the Washington Wizards. Right? But they have this incredible offense. They have this, you know what I mean. They have this incredible offense, though, okay? And I don't think that anyone on their roster right now is good enough to put in there as that fifth guy to make their defense so elite that they can afford to lose a lot of value on that superb offense, right? So they need a guy, okay, who they can put at the point of attack, be a really good on-ball defender to shore up their defense, take it from bad to below average, right, without hurting this offensive juggernaut. So he needs to be able to, space the floor on offense, attack closeouts, cut, offensive rebound, all those little things where you can provide value, right? And he needs to be a good point of attack defender, okay? And no, Milwaukee Bucks fans, you guys are not getting Alex Caruso. You have nothing to give.
Yeah.
Literally nothing. Right?
That asset chest is depleted. Yeah, it's gone.
No,
There's nothing there.
So I was looking at some guys, right? We've already seen the Malik Beasley experience. Not happen, right? Damian Lillard, he's going to be on the floor, of course, but he's not going to be the primary point of attack defender. Pat Connaughton, we've seen time and time again, he can't do that.
No.
Jay Crowder, no. Bobby Portis, I love him. He's not defending at the point of attack. He's too big, right? So that left me with like really three guys. AJ Green is a very good spacer, and the offense looks pretty good when he's on the floor, but the defense looks pitiful.
Yeah.
So that's not going to work. Andre Jackson Jr. is a very good defender, maybe the best defender on this team on the perimeter, but he doesn't really do anything on offense. Mm-hmm. I hear he's got some good playmaking chops, but I haven't seen it yet. And you also don't want him as your primary playmaker.
Right.
So that leaves us with MarJon Beauchamp, who is, by my money, either the first or second best point of attack defender on the team. I wouldn't say he's like Herb Jones rookie year level point of attack defense. I don't think he's like flirting with all league or anything like that, but I think he's pretty good. He's got good size. He is a good cutter. He's got some good ball skills. I saw him operate in some second side pick and rolls in some of the games I watched. And this season, he's shooting 43% from three. Now, I went back and I took all of his three-point percentages from his 2 NBA seasons, his 2 G League seasons, his 2 preseasons, his 1 G League season, his 2 Summer League performances, and then his 1 playoff series. And what I got here was that he is... I think it's about 35% as a three-point shooter. About 35%, okay, which is for a guy who's
not
getting
great,
left,
but not
open for. Yeah. It's below average, honestly, for his role.
He should be a better three-point shooter. Yeah, or rather, he needs to be
to fill this role. But he is shooting 43% this year. I'm not saying he's going to continue that. And the reason why he's on our radar, again, a guy you need to pay attention to, if that three-point percentage stays in that like high 30s on catch and shoot threes, then think about a healthy Chris Middleton, Damian Lillard, Brook Lopez, Giannis, and then you have this like quote unquote 3-and-D guy gluing it all together. That makes the Bucks a title contender. We've talked on multiple episodes about how if they had Javon Carter, I would see them as a title contender. This would help remedy that. So hopefully that kind of gives you guys a sense. I know that was a really, really long-winded discussion on MarJon Beauchamp.
Bravo, it was fantastic.
Where else are you going to get that from, though?
I was enthralled. I was waiting on every word. I'm with you. I think I actually talked about before the season. I did a biggest X factors for every NBA team, and I think I listed health as one of the things, but which you can say that about pretty much any title contender that like goes all in. But I think I mentioned MarJon Beauchamp as kind of what he can do is going to determine a lot. I think we've talked about this before, how like NBA teams are always we talk about it with the Cavs all the time. They're trying to figure out when it's okay to sacrifice their offense for a little bit of defense. You sacrifice defense for more offense. And like, you can really see this in the Bucks more than anybody. Like, yes, they have, like, the Pacers game is a good example, in the sense that like their defense would lock in, but they were pretty content with giving up a lot of buckets. Like, there were times where the Pacers were just getting whatever they wanted at the rim. Granted, you watched that fourth quarter when Brook and Giannis wanted to lock in on defense, they were able to, but they can't do that for 48 minutes a night. They can't do that for 30 plus minutes a night. It's just not going to happen. It's not realistic. And you're going to sacrifice a lot on the offensive end by having them give that level of effort. So I think I haven't paid enough attention to Beauchamp this year in the Bucks games that I have watched, but I mean, he's the only option really. Like, anyone who's still expecting a Jay Crowder to like be able to come in a playoff setting and be like a lockdown defender, to me, you're deluding yourself. I just don't think that's realistic at all. And like you said, Beauchamp's the only reasonable candidate to do that after that. And also, you mentioned Pat Connaughton. Obviously, he's not going to be like locking anybody down, but I also think for his defensive drawbacks, I think in certain scenarios, he's better served as like a help defender. I think he does a pretty good job of like, stunning at the nail, even being able to come in, like provide like weak side rim protection as a guard, like when the situation calls for it, when there's like a guard driving to the basket and he's like camped out in the corner on a shooter, like he does a decent job of like contesting those shots. But yeah, they just have nobody who can lock up on the perimeter.
He's our only hope. I can imagine like a shittily made CW TV movie. It's like, what if it doesn't work? He's our only hope. That's
I need a Bucks fan to like make a trailer like that, because that sounds like it would do numbers on Twitter. I think I'm glad you mentioned Beauchamp, because I'm going to save a couple of players and skip to the second player I had on this list, because I think it fits well with the Beauchamp discussion. The Timberwolves have been amazing this year. It's no secret at this point that, like, aside from the fact that the Timberwolves are the Timberwolves and they're a Minnesota sports team, and Minnesota sports teams are destined for like disappointment. And I say that as a fan of Minnesota sports teams. For all intents and purposes, the Timberwolves are true contenders. They're in that upper echelon of like Boston and Denver. I think they've proven enough at this point that you can say they're on the same level as that. I think, especially after last night, when you see Naz Reid drop, like, 27 points? He had like 7 threes, just like ridiculous stuff. I think an under-discussed story for them this year has been Nickeil Alexander-Walker. And I am somebody who has been very critical of Nickeil Alexander-Walker in the past. I really, really, really struggled to see a ton of the value that he provided last year. Granted, I think his performance this year is much, 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 much different than the performances he was giving last year. I genuinely think he has improved as a player. That being said, there is not a ton to complain about in the context of Minnesota. I would argue he's been among the best defensive wings in the entire NBA this season. Especially with Jaden McDaniels out, he had to take on a lot more of the perimeter responsibilities, guarding, taking on the best player on the opposing team every night kind of stuff. He was doing that and holding his own very, very well. I think his screen navigation has gotten a lot better. He kind of had a tendency to just die on screen, even if he was in isolation, able to defend certain guys. The second a screen would come, he'd just die on those screens. And then all of a sudden, you've got Cat playing at the level and you're just giving up a bucket at that point. This year, it's a different story. His screen navigation is much better. He's making himself smaller to get through those tight windows and stepping over screens and being able to chase guys off the 3-point line and funnel them down towards the paint. An interesting number that I came across, there's only 5 players in the NBA. So real quick, a preface for this. We've talked about estimated plus minus before on this podcast. It's like the proprietary dunks and threes stat. I'm not super into advanced stats, but this is one that I think does a pretty good job with contextualizing what a player is doing in terms of impacting each side of the floor. Right now, there's only 5 players in the NBA that have a defensive estimated plus minus above 3. Jalen Suggs, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Goga Bitadze, Evan Mobley, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. And that makes total sense to me. I see that, and I'm not surprised one bit. One thing you have to consider is defensive EPM kind of can be skewed by a player simply playing on a good defense rather than their individual contributions being the reason that their defensive EPM is that high. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, listeners of the show, I'm a Thunder fan. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a very solid defender, but for him to be on the same level as a Jalen Suggs, who I think has been all defense level this year, Evan Mobley, who is consistently an all defensive caliber player at this point. Goga Bitadze has been very good, but I think rim protection is kind of inherently more valuable. Not necessarily inherently more valuable. It is, but that's a different discussion. I think that kind of gives you a boost in terms of these defensive advanced metrics. But Nickeil Alexander-Walker being here among those guys makes complete sense. It's not that he's just fitting in with Minnesota's defense. He is a big reason why their defense has been this good. There was another, let's see, I did something with it. Here it is. I can't find it. I had another number about some of the lineups so far this year. But let's talk about his offense a little bit, because this is where the discussion gets a little bit. This is where you kind of view him as a swing player of, yes, we know Minnesota's a contender, but I think with Nickeil Alexander-Walker, his offense is where you start discussing how dominant of a contender are they? And when you start looking at some of the numbers for him, you can kind of understand Minnesota has a good offense in certain lineups and certain contexts, but when certain guys are on the floor, that offense kind of falls apart. Nickeil Alexander-Walker's offense is much better this year, but it's still not great. Counting stats are up. Efficiency is generally up, but kind of on a deeper look, it's a different story. The 3-point shot, I believe he's a 36% shooter on the year from deep, which is a little bit below average, but it's fine. That's definitely the defense has to honor you, which I think, in my opinion, that's more important than necessarily being a 37% plus 3-point shooter. It's more, is the defense actually closing out on you? The good news with Nickeil Alexander-Walker is that even though he's slightly below average as a 3-point shooter, He's 40% on catch and shoot threes, which is what he needs to be alongside guys like Anthony Edwards, Mike Conley, who has been ridiculous from three, ridiculous across the board, but he's been insane as a 3-point shooter this year. So playing alongside those guys, all Alexander-Walker needs to do is just hit his catch and shoot threes when he's playing alongside those guys. And I think you can really see the issues that the Timberwolves have when they're kind of running those all bench lineups. And I think one of the things that really sticks out is that Nickeil Alexander-Walker is terrible off the drive. He does not, when he's driving, he does not make his shots at all. He is 33% from the field on shots coming off of drives per NBA.com. And I was interested to see how much he was doing as a cutter. Because again, like his 3-point shooting, a way that good 3-point shooters can impact the offensive side of the ball is when you have the defense pulled that far out to you because they have to honor you. Being a cutter really opens up a lot. And so I was curious. I kind of had a gut feeling that he didn't do a whole lot of cutting. And I actually went to the NBA's website and tried to look up his numbers off of cuts. And the sample size is so small that he doesn't even show up. You have to have a minimum of, I think it's 10, a minimum of 10 possessions on any given play type to actually be tracked on the NBA's website. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is not on there. So the fact that he's negligible as a cutter isn't ideal. It's not the end of the world, but these are the small things that I think he needs to get better at to really elevate things. Not necessarily, like I said, not necessarily with the starters. I think he's fine when he's playing alongside them. It's when he's in those lineups with Kyle Anderson, Naz Reid, Troy Brown Jr., when it's like him and 3 of those guys on the floor, that's when he needs to be doing the little things that provide more value, choosing situations where he can drive and make shots, because pretty much right now, 33% of his shots off of drives are going in, which is horrible. I mean, theoretically, if you're driving, you're either driving into inside the arc, like mid-range shot or a floater, or it's a layup at the rim. So 33% in theory should at least be like 45%. Like, give me that. I just need even 45% because the volume at which he's scoring, like shooting off of drives, is so low. But I think him just giving a little bit more on the offensive end is going to do wonders for an already fantastic team.
Question for you.
Yes.
In a vacuum, obviously this all changes depending on the matchup. But what's your ideal closing 5 for Minnesota look like in the playoffs? Everybody's healthy. No trades.
I mean, to me, it's got to be Mike Conley, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels. I mean, I would hope he offensively. Honestly, I haven't looked at his like efficiency, but I would imagine he's been decent enough this year to be in that closing lineup, and the defense is valuable enough that he has reason to be in there. I've seen enough from Cat this year that I'm like, I'm good with Cat in the closing lineup. They haven't had any issues with him in the closing lineup. And then Rudy Gobert. I mean, to me, it's the starters.
So you don't think Nickeil factors in that at all?
It would depend on the matchup for me, because, there's certain teams where, like, honestly, against a team like Dallas last night is a good example. They're insane offensively. And if you need to make that trade-off where, like, okay, Cat, we're going to put you on the bench. We're going to slide McDaniels over to the 4. We're going to bring in Nickeil Alexander-Walker at the 3 and have Ant just be the 2. In that situation, I could see, a Conley, Nickeil, Anthony Edwards, and McDaniels Gobert lineup. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. So Conley's always closing for you, pretty much, unless there's just like too much size on the floor.
Yeah, I mean, if it would be a size thing or if I think another good example would be the Kings, where like there's just no one who's containing De'Aaron Fox, and like Mike Conley's getting burned, can't fight over, a lot of the DHOs that they run with Herter, stuff like that, where there's just like too many shooters on the floor and too many off ball actions going on. I think in a situation like that, you'd probably have to take Conley off the floor, but kind of in a vacuum against, if it was an offense versus offense type deal, then, I think you probably live with the starters because I think there's enough defense and offense, especially in the half court if we're talking the playoffs, because Minnesota's been a very good half court offense this year, despite across the board their offense not necessarily being, I think they're top 10 at this point, but I think they're probably closer to like just around average than they are like way above average. So I don't know. That's an interesting question. I think Minnesota can get real weird with that. Which I think is a good problem to have because like flexibility is, I think, one of the most important things you can have in the playoffs.
Should I ask my last question?
Yes.
Okay. If Nickeil Alexander-Walker makes the offensive improvements that you want, would you prefer him over Conley on the floor?
No, probably not. Because I don't think. No, the thing to me is I think you just lose. I think you just lose too much with like the Gobert and Conley pick and roll. I think the gravity that generates is just way too valuable. And I don't know. Ant's improved a lot, like more than I expected him to as a passer and overall playmaker. But I think the fact that Conley's able to like kind of get into that in-between zone in the paint and knock down floaters and like the threat of that being able to create lobs for Gobert. I don't think there's anyone really on the team that can do that right now. And I know Nickeil Alexander-Walker can't really do that. And Anthony Edwards can't really do that, even though he's been fantastic in terms of his individual chemistry with Gobert this year. I don't know if Nickeil would be able to, not just him, like it almost sounds like I'm putting it on him to be better than Mike Conley. It's less about him being better than Mike Conley and more about no one else on the floor with him would be able to do what Mike Conley can do.
Mm-hmm. That's like we'll talk about the Timberwolves more, but that's like the interesting conundrum is like Conley's like, it's tough to have a guy that small in today's modern NBA on defense in a playoff series, but like nobody on offense can do what he does.
Right.
Let's talk about the Los Angeles teams.
All right, let's do it.
Because we won't get any listens if we don't talk about the LA Lakers.
Right.
Me and you both have a little X factor guy from this team. Different guys though. Real quickly, would you agree with me that pretty much in pen against most matchups, Lakers' current roster, you want LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Austin Reeves, and Rui Hachimura on the floor closing a game?
Yeah, I agree with that.
So that's their core four, right? That's what we're working with. So with that four, the two obvious weaknesses in that three, we'll say three. You need more shooting, okay? More point of attack defense, and then a little bit more secondary playmaking, right? I think playoff LeBron, Austin Reeves, a lot of playmaking, but you need a little bit more ball handling, right?
Yeah.
Some problems like D'Angelo Russell's their starting point guard. He's good ball handler. He can play off balls, good shooter. Not the guy you want anchoring your point of attack defense. So he's kind of out. Taurean Prince has had some really nice flashes this year, but I feel like even though he's a good off-ball shooter, like I don't like his closeout attacking. I think he needs more off the dribble. I think he's still pretty easy to scheme against, and he isn't just such a good point of attack defender that I need him on the floor.
Right.
And he's a little bit slower against slipperier guys too. But So the one guy I picked out, that I identified, was second-year swingman Max Christie. We need to do some sort of film study on his defense against Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. It was a couple Wednesdays ago, a couple Thursdays ago, something like that. But he was phenomenal. He did, honestly, other than Asur Thompson, he did the best job of guarding Shai this year. And I feel like nobody talked about it, mostly because the NBA, I don't know if they have it now, but the NBA never put out the play-by-play clips for that game, at least when I was trying to clip it. So maybe that's why it's lost in history. But he was so good at keeping Shai in front of him, did a really good job against Donovan Mitchell, did a good job against Fred VanVleet. Like, he's a very good point of attack defender. I wouldn't say he's got like a super high motor, but he is able to exert all his energy on defense because he has a limited role on offense. And then offensively, guy can put the ball on the floor. I trust him to attack closeouts. The question mark with him in the swing factor there is his shooting. I think on the season he's 31% from three, but for him, I also pulled out that data point where I checked all of his regular season threes for his career, all his G League season threes for his career, all his preseason, all his summer league, all his playoffs, and I got on 248 three-point attempts, he's a 36.7% three-point shooter. So right around that 37 range we like. And then as a free throw shooter on 102 attempts, he's an 82% free throw shooter. Now, for the folks at home, free throw shooting is a very good context-independent way of measuring a player's shooting ability, right? So
they're almost always positively correlated.
Yeah, exactly. And plus, like all free throws are the same. Like everybody takes free throws pretty much under the same circumstances,
right?
Except for that one weird year where the Raptors mascot was. What did he do to Devin Booker? You remember that? Yeah. Other than that, once you eliminate that anomaly,
and DeMar DeRozan's daughter. That's another one.
Yeah. She's god, they need to bring her back. The Bulls need her back.
That was awesome.
But so yeah, that's like that swing piece I'm looking at. But I'm cautiously optimistic because of the free throw shooting, because of the 3-point shooting, because of the very carved out, isolated role the Lakers need from him. I like Max Christie. I think he can be that fifth guy in their closing lineups in the playoffs.
So I'm actually glad that we're doing this because the other player that we have two Lakers players, yours is Max Christie. The other player I chose was Cam Reddish. So not necessarily competing here because we're discussing them as like X factors. Cam Reddish to me also is in a situation where like he's showing a lot, and if he can show some more, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, dude, this guy needs to be like a closer for sure, and like he's potentially a high level starter. Christie has been, I think, way more under the radar. People have kind of woken up to how good Cam Reddish has been, but I do think most people still are not privy to the idea that like Max Christie could very well be that guy in the playoffs. You know who I'm kind of thinking of a lot as an OKC fan when we're having these discussions is back in the COVID playoffs when OKC was playing the Rockets in the first round. Lou Dort was like that guy where he was like clamping up James Harden, and he had like a couple games when they were in the bubble where he was like clamping up LeBron and like face guarding him, and all those clips were going viral. That's kind of what we're talking about. Not necessarily just in terms of defense, but guys who have those kind of breakouts where, they're not the, 20 plus, 25 plus, 30 plus point per game scorers throughout a playoff series, but they're like, oh, he shot, like a Caleb Martin, like, he shot 50% from three throughout a series and like 47% on good mid-range volume. Like, where did that come from? While also clamping up some of the best players in the NBA. That's the kind of stuff we're talking about. And Max Christie definitely fits that bill. And I think Cam Reddish potentially fits that bill. More so for his defense. That being said, I think offensively this year I've seen more from Cam Reddish that is positive than I have ever seen from him throughout his honestly kind of long NBA career at this point. Like, he's been in the league for what, like 5 years?
Same as Zion and
Yeah.
RJ.
So
It's funny.
like,
Go ahead. Sorry. Should I go ahead or should you go?
You
ahead?
first.
Okay. Thank you. If you guys are seeing on video, we're having a good time here. We're not awkwardly stumbling upon our words. But it's funny we're talking about, because the reason I wanted to do this video is because of Rui Hachimura, to be honest. Like, when he like broke out last year, it was like, how did I miss this? Like, I remember my editor at The Analyst, when the trade happened for Rui to go to Lakers, like, hey, do we want to do anything on this? I'm like, I literally said, I'm like, it doesn't seem like it'll be too consequential. And it's like, wait, what? Like, but it's just like, it's like looking at these guys, basically, it's like, the way I think about it is like, my dad will be like, what do you think of, like, you think the Bucks can win the title this year? And then I'll say to him, I'm like, hey, Dad, like, I don't know, but keep an eye on MarJon Beauchamp. And then like the casual fan will look at you like, what do you mean MarJon Beauchamp? I'm worried about Giannis.
He's playing
and Dame.
20 minutes a night.
Yeah, and LeBron James and Anthony Davis. But it's like, there's always that guy. There's that Caleb Martin, that guy who you put him in a very isolated role, and they are like a superstar in that isolated role, and it just changes the team's entire outlook. And so the Lakers, that's what makes the Lakers dangerous, though, is they have like two swing pieces like that, with Cam Reddish and Max Christie. So like the odds of them, one of those breaking in their favor, is just higher than most of the teams we're talking about here.
Yeah. So just to kind of make the case for Cam Reddish, we can go through some fun numbers that I found. Right now, the Lakers have a plus 3.8 net rating with him on the floor, and that's over the course of over 1,000 possessions on the year so far. So very solid sample size. It's not like the top teams in the league have like plus 7, plus 8, plus 9 net ratings. So, plus 3.8 isn't necessarily mind blowing, but they are in general a positive team when they have him on the floor. They have an 84th percentile defense when he's been on the floor this year. So really, I think right now, a lot of the value you're getting from him is his defensive ability. I think he has showcased some really strong point of attack defense when he is kind of getting guys on the perimeter who are trying to create off the catch. He has pretty much prevented a lot of high level kind of secondary shot creators from being able to get what they want. And, playing alongside Anthony Davis certainly helps, because kind of all you have to do is get those guys off the 3-point line so that Anthony Davis can do the rest. But Cam Reddish is doing that very, very well, and also providing, he's not just giving up once his guys kind of get near Anthony Davis. He's making the right rotations and closing out on the guys that he needs to. He's not falling asleep off ball. He's making sure, like, okay, an extra pass was made and I need to be on the open man. He's quick to realize where that open man is. And I think that's some of the stuff that we have seen in very short, limited bursts in the past, but now, like, he's started, I think, every game he's played in this year. I don't know if he's played every game, but he's started in every game he's played, and he's been, a plus defender. The offense is shaky. If you look at his efficiency, I think he's 41% from the field on the year and like 31% from three, I want to say, something like that. There's some good news, though. He is 37% on corner threes, which you kind of wish would be a little bit higher. Corner threes, theoretically are the easiest 3-point shot to make. Granted, it's not in a vacuum. Most 3-point shots are created differently. But 37% from three, it's one of those situations where, like, okay, he has to be honored in the corner, and that's where he's going to be a lot of the time. Some other good news is he's 63% at the rim, which I think from like a primary, secondary, or even like a tertiary creator, 63% at the rim, you'd kind of be like, that's fine. It's not really spectacular, but it's fine. For Cam Reddish, I think that's good in the sense that it's an indicator that he's doing a very good job attacking closeouts. and he's recognizing when defenders are overcommitting and he has an opportunity to get by them and get to the rim. He's finishing on those opportunities. A very large number of his shots at the rim and from three are assisted. So that's another good indicator that he's creating for himself within the flow of the offense and kind of just taking whatever the defense gives him rather than forcing the issue, which, again, in the past with Cam Reddish, that has sometimes been the issue. He forces things and he tries to do more than he can. 70% of his shots this year are corner threes or shots at the rim, which for a guy like Cam Reddish, that is just about exactly what you want. You don't want him taking mid-range shots. I think he's taking like 7% of his shots in the mid-range. It's an incredibly small number. So to me, the consistent thing that we've mentioned throughout this episode is like kind of optimizing roles. Like put guys in very, very limited roles where their responsibilities are clearly outlined and they very clearly know what they need to do. I think Cam Reddish has done a very good job of digesting and executing a very specific role, and he's done it at a very high level. But
that was beautiful.
I think Max Christie, there's a world where like both of them are seen as like, how the heck do the Lakers have both of these guys? I think it's kind of already being seen like that, but I think by the end of the season, it's very much more amplified. And everyone's like, this isn't, how the heck did we let this happen?
Lakers are scary, man. They scare me. If I'm any team other than the Nuggets.
This is one of the first Lakers teams in a while where I think you can look at them at the beginning of the season and be like, they don't really need to do a whole lot in terms of trades. Like, this is a good team already. They can kind of just move forward with this and see what happens. Granted, they'll probably make trades because it's the Lakers.
It's LA. Yeah. Before we get down to your last one, who I'm really excited to talk about, we'll do my last kind of potential X factor. So I was pretty enamored with the Dallas Mavericks early in the season. Super
I love
high
your
on
pick,
them in the offseason.
I just want to preface that.
Super high on them in the offseason. So I watched I think 7 of their first 9 games, like from start to finish. And I watched them and I took very copious notes. I thought a lot about the pieces they have. And as I watched them, I saw Dante Exum on the floor. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. It's good he's back in the league. Does he look a little chubby? He's like, his shorts kind of fit him weird. His shorts are long. That's what it was. His shorts were really long. I hate when like shorts are like close to touching your knees. Please keep them well above the knees, folks.
I'm with you, man.
Currently rocking my 5-inch seam Lululemon shorts. You guys should check those out.
There you go.
They should sponsor the show. But
send us free shorts, please.
Yeah, please. I never really, I was like, okay, Dante Exum, cool, whatever. He's not going to factor into my calculus, right? And I'm watching this Mavericks team. I'm like, okay, Love Lively, he's not good enough to fix this problem, right? They need somebody at the point of attack that can, just help them be. They're kind of like, they're basically, the Dallas Mavericks to me are the Milwaukee Bucks of the West. They have this awesome offense and paper defense. Their defense is paper, okay? So I'm like, help me. Like, can we put enough defense on the floor to keep this offense at that elite level and make this defense below average, not horrible? And Derrick Jones Jr. has been very good this year as a defender, but when he's on the floor offensively, it kills them. Josh Green, who I love, I see him as more of an off-ball defensive player. You talked about Pat Connaughton. I think that's his best role as opposed to being on the ball just because he's so jittery. Like, he over-anticipates things. He's like the main culprit at like running into screens when guards like reject the screen and all that. He's just so super jittery. I think he's better off the ball, kind of intercepting passes, digging, all that stuff. I'm like, okay, so they need a point of attack defender, but this guy also needs to be able to space the floor enough for Luka and Kyrie so they could still have that elite offense. And it would be nice if he could also create off the dribble a little bit to attack 4-on-3 situations after teams blitz Kyrie or Luka. And then I start watching the last couple of Mavericks games, and I'm like, Hey, this Dante Exum guy kind of looks like that. He is awesome on defense. That's always been his thing. But now, I mean, he's always also been a really good ball handler. He was always a good point guard. He came into the league as a point guard. He has ball skills. So he can attack closeouts, attack 4-on-3 situations. Problem is, the reason he was out of the league is because he couldn't shoot worth anything. Now, this is major small sample size alert, and his free throw percentage is not good, which makes me hesitant to say that he's like for sure the fifth guy, put him in pen. But right now, 40.5% on 37 threes this season. Not bad. Worth paying attention to. The Mavericks, when Dante Exum is on the floor, are in the 99th percentile on offense, the 60th percentile on defense, which is, again, way better than being bad. Yeah. And then overall, they have a 99th percentile net rating. Again, small sample size alert. But they are very good when Dante Exum's on the floor. And he gives them this lineup flexibility where it's like, okay, we have Luka, Kyrie, put him in pen, right? I think Grant Williams at this point, put him in pen. Okay, so you got those three guys. If Exum's on the floor as that point of attack guy, he's also got length. So he could be like, and Luka has size too. He has plus size for a guard, right? So those are your three. Grant Williams the four. You could have Derrick Jones Jr. as your one non-shooter on the floor playing the small ball five, which he played a lot in Chicago. Okay, and you could have a super versatile lineup with that. And you could channel into Derrick Jones Jr.'s good defense instead of having him play with Lively and have two non-shooters on the floor and really kill your offense. Or you could have Lively on the floor, your guy, the love of your life, Derek Lively. Or if you want to have a bunch of spacing and this guy ever decides to get healthy, you could have Maxi Kleber on the floor as the five. So if this Dante Exum thing hits, and he's the one out of these three I'm the least certain will hit, just because we have such a history of him not being a good shooter. But if it hits, watch out for those Mavericks in the playoffs, man.
Dude, I was watching the Timberwolves play last night, and they played the Mavericks. And like the funny thing with the Mavericks is, yeah, they gave up a ton of points last night. Like defensively, they're not a good team. But you watch that game, and it's like the Mavericks played a good game. It's just the Timberwolves they were just that good. Like I came away learning more about the Mavericks and like being higher on them than like I did the Timberwolves. I was like, yeah, the Timberwolves did what I think the Timberwolves are going to do for the rest of the year, and that's just be a good team. But the Mavericks, I was like, yeah, defensively they sucked, but offensively, yeah, this team is sound. And Dante Exum was the guy that like would make plays, and out of nowhere I'd just be like, that was Dante Exum that did that. Like he had a dunk in transition last night that came out of nowhere, and he tore his ACL like 7 years ago, and he had that dunk in transition. I was like, you're not supposed to be able to do that. And he's not short, but he's not like exceptionally tall. So him doing that, I was like, goodness, like he's tapping into something that I just think a lot of people didn't realize that he still had in him. And like you said, if the shooting comes along with it, that's a really scary team, because we know that defensively they are what they are. I think most teams end up locking into a certain defense flattens to a certain extent in the playoffs, where like, you know, you might have some outlier, really, really high scoring games. But teams kind of lock in when they need to lock in. And the Mavericks, you know, whatever happens. They'll live with their offense being their calling card. But, you know, they're not a team that I said this about the Pacers too, who are, you know, the definition of all offense, zero defense in the NBA right now. It doesn't really matter. Like, obviously the Mavericks are trying to contend right now. Regardless of if they win a playoff series, win two playoff series, make it to the conference finals, make it to the finals, regardless of what happens, whatever team plays them and whatever team has to, you know, ends up beating them and going to the next round, assuming that the Mavericks don't, you know, go all the way, whatever team plays them is going to be exhausted for the subsequent round. I said that about the Pacers. I think the Mavericks are kind of in that similar situation where you're just going to be gassed because they're going to wear you down for 48 minutes on every single night. Even if it's a 4-game series, you're going to be exhausted because they're going to wear you down for all of those 4 games and make your defense work incredibly hard. And if you don't have the personnel to stop it, then, like the Kings and Mavericks series would, that's, 250 plus points every single night.
I'm canceling like big family gatherings. Like I'd miss if Easter Sunday was Kings Mavs game 1. Sorry, Grandpa. I'm
turning off my phone.
There.
Don't call me. Don't text me.
Yeah. Sorry, can't make dinner tonight. I agree with you. It's just like honestly, I think the Mavericks. I might have to walk this take back later on, but I think the Mavericks have the most scheme-proof offense in the NBA right now, just because of how much we've seen Luka Doncic and his adaptability in the playoffs and Kyrie Irving's tough shot making. Yeah, cool. Let's get to that. Let's get to that last guy. Let's get to the man of the hour, the guy who nobody gives enough love, the guy who you have agonized over for a whole week now.
So the video will fortunately be coming out today, God willing. And he's different from all of the players we've talked about because he is a established player. He is the third option on the team, I think. I don't know in terms of shot distribution, kind of what that looks like for them right now. Offense isn't really the point with him, but the player that I'm alluding to right now is Keegan Murray. The Sacramento Kings, we know that the Sacramento Kings they're an offense-oriented team. However, Keegan Murray hasn't just been the best defender on the Kings. The Kings are like a good defense when he's on the floor. Not a great defense. Maybe just like a slightly above average defense, but I would say they are a good defense when he's on the floor. To give you some context, when Keegan Murray's on the floor, they have a defensive rating of 114.6. Doesn't sound great, but the starters as a whole, De'Aaron Fox, Kevin Huerter, Keegan Murray, Harrison Barnes, Domantas Sabonis, those 5, when they're on the floor together, they have a defensive rating of 106.8, which is good. That is a good defense. I think that would probably put them, if you just sat that next to the top 10 best defenses in the NBA right now, I think 106.8 would probably put you
that'd be number 1.
Right around.
I'm pretty sure. I think that'd be number 1.
They might be number 1. I haven't looked at it lately, but that's very good defense. So a big part of that to me is Keegan Murray. He has been kind of. It's hard to see. The reason this video is taking me so long is because it's almost hard to see the value that he's providing defensively. Because if you go to any given game and you watch what he's doing, sometimes he's just camped out in a corner on a guy. And that's what I started to realize while I was watching the film. And I was like, it's not the fact that he's clamping up, it's not the fact that he's clamping up a Paul George or a Donovan Mitchell or players like that. He is, and at times, but he's almost just eliminating these guys from the offense entirely to where they can't participate. If you watch the Nuggets game where Keegan Murray was matched up against Michael Porter Jr. the entire time, Michael Porter Jr. is a pretty quick trigger off of screens. He will come off a screen and he will pull that thing with pretty much zero hesitation. If you watch the Kings game against the Nuggets, their most recent one, that was not the case. Michael Porter Jr. did not want to shoot the ball coming off of screens. Keegan Murray was chasing him off of those, and either Michael Porter Jr. would step into his shot like he was going to shoot and he would pass out of it because he didn't like how much space he had, or he would drive and try to get to the rim, in which case it's just left to the help defense, and Keegan Murray does a good job of staying behind him and applying more pressure. But if you watch their game against the Clippers, Paul George just didn't want to like play offense when Keegan Murray was on him. And it could be a situation where like, okay, he's kind of being used as a decoy. But if you watch early in the game, Paul George was a pretty active participant in the offense, coming off of screens, rejecting like pin downs from Kawhi because Keegan Murray was fronting him a lot of the time. And then trying to get, cutting to the strong side of the floor and trying to get entry passes for post up so he could, face up and create. He couldn't get any of that against Keegan Murray. And that's where I started to realize that a lot of the value that Keegan Murray provides is that it's not about the shots that guys are taking against him. It's the shots that they're not taking. It's the fact that at times they're not even shooting at all because Keegan Murray is on them. He does a ton of switching, which in general doesn't necessarily mean, that's not an inherently good thing. But he is a versatile defender. I think a lot of people forget Keegan Murray is 6'8" and he has a plus wingspan. He's a big freaking guy. And this year, not only is he a big body that can guard up and down, he's quick now. He can fight over those screens. One thing I've noticed, and this is a little bit like in the trenches, but like his ankle mobility is insane. Like the angles at which his body is to the floor at times when he's fighting over screens is like, if this is a 45-degree angle, he's like this to the floor. For those watching, I just mimicked like what probably a 30-degree angle would look like. It's ridiculous stuff. And that's why, like, even if guys are getting space off of these handoffs and off of these like pin downs and curls, Keegan Murray is so quick to chase off of those that space doesn't really matter, because by the time they get to where they want to shoot from, he's right there when they start to get into that shot. And so they're either passing out of those shots or like trying to drive because they're just not getting what they want. Just a few more numbers. When he's on the floor, 114.6 defensive rating, not spectacular. But when he's off the floor, that declines to 118.4. So that's a 4 points per 100 possession swing. The starters without Keegan Murray on the floor, they have a 120.8 defensive rating.
Sidebar, I looked up that 106.8, that it would be the second best defense in the NBA if that was their entire team, behind only your Minnesota Timberwolves.
Okay, interesting. 120.8 would probably be dead last.
Have it
right?
pulled up still.
It might not be.
No, it would be second last behind the Washington Wizards.
That's what okay. But yeah, so the starters literally go from the second best defense in the NBA with him on the floor to the second worst defense in the NBA with him off the floor, which is very telling to me. Like, it is a wing defender, in theory, a wing defender. I think he's doing a little bit more point of attack and a little bit more switching and guarding up and down this season. But normally we see like bigs have that level of impact in certain lineup contexts, like, starters and whatnot. This is a guy who's doing pretty much everything defensively. And the results are speaking for themselves. And the reason I have him as kind of like the swing player is because I think it's not like a Lou Dort situation or like a Caleb Martin situation. To me, it's almost more like a Klay Thompson situation, where like you've got the De'Aaron Fox number one 30-point per game scorer guy. You have Sabonis, who, he is a solid scorer. He's a solid big man scorer and fantastic offensive presence and playmaker. But to me, Keegan Murray's kind of like the potential Klay Thompson, where like he is this very, very high level defensive presence, and also he's potentially a high volume 40% 3-point shooter with a budding mid-range ability. This is a long diatribe of me saying, like, it's not a potential role player who could have like an amazing series. This is like a potential all-star breakout kind of player, two-way all-star. Mm-hmm. And that's, I mean, the Kings I've already kind of penciled in as kind of that second tier of contender, which like I consider them a contender, but they're not perfect. Keegan Murray, a fully realized version of Keegan Murray, I think that makes the Kings as close to the top tier of contender as they could possibly be without putting them there, because obviously there's still issues up and down that roster. But he's unreal. It's unreal how much of a defensive leap he's taken this year. Yeah, no, I mean,
we've both been on the Keegan Murray train for a while. I like you kind of incorporating we were talking about earlier, how like most of these guys, you probably wouldn't put them in the top 100 if you did that, right? But Keegan Murray, of course, if he continues to trend in this direction, will be more than just a top 100 player. I'm talking top 50, flirting with top 25 player. But it's just like, it's always interesting. First of all, it's funny to me. I think, you know how last episode we talked about like guys who they're so theatrical with their defense that they trick you into thinking they have a high motor. Keegan Murray's like the exact opposite of that.
Totally.
He's like, he has like the worst posture I've ever seen, okay, of any NBA player. So it looks like he's just like a stiff, like he can't do anything, like he has 2 left feet or something. Mm-hmm. But if you watch this guy on the perimeter, like last postseason, this guy was chasing around Steph Curry. I'm trying to think what Kings game I was watching where he was guarding the point of attack. I mean, he was guarding Shea. He's their main point of attack guy. They have him guard ball handlers. Mm-hmm. I think he was guarding Reggie Jackson at one point in that Denver game.
Yep.
And then he's big. He's a big guy. Like he's long. He was guarding BI in the in-season tournament, and BI got the best of him a lot of times. But I mean, that's what BI does. He's a great tough shot maker.
Right.
And I think people do this thing. I think if you look right now, Keegan Murray's shooting like just above 30% from 3, right?
Yeah.
So they're doing this thing where it's like, I think later in the season, his numbers are going to positively regress upward, right? And people are going to be like, whoa, man, Keegan Murray has just continued to grow this season. And it's like, he's always like, his like floor game, players talk about this a lot, floor game. His floor game looks awesome right now. It's just the ball is not going in the hole. He looks stronger. He looks more decisive. He looks more confident. He's moving well.
The process is fantastic.
Yeah, the process is awesome. And soon the results are going to catch up. And like, I wouldn't be surprised if like after the All-Star break, like everyone's like, what the heck? Keegan Murray's like, awesome now. And like the Kings, like their whole picture changes. Like imagine like you have De'Aaron Fox, you have Sabonis, and then there's like a third top 50 guy there. That's basically what would happen if Keegan continues on this trajectory. This perfect like two-way forward who can play on and off the ball. He's awesome. I love him. I think he changes the Kings' whole ceiling both this year and moving forward, depending on how his growth goes. And I'm seeing a lot of positive signs from him. Yeah. Do we want to, really quickly before we start to head out, just recap. I had MarJon Beauchamp, Dante, Exum, and Max Christie. My good friend Alex, he had Cam Reddish, Keegan Murray, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. But yeah, that was that. Go ahead, Alex. You say what you need to say.
I guess we could kind of consider this like an X Factors kind of episode, but definitely more on like the role player level. Not necessarily like, an X Factor could be anything. I will give some honorable mentions. I don't know. We don't have to dive into them, but just to shout out like a few guys that I considered. Cason Wallace was one that I considered because I think if the Thunder were to trade Josh Giddey, I think Cason Wallace would be the logical next man up to kind of take on more responsibilities. Another guy who kind of blew me away with some of the advanced numbers I was coming across was Isaiah Hartenstein. I think the Knicks aren't quite there yet as far as contenders go, but he was a guy that I was like, whoa, He's doing a lot for them. And then also Immanuel Quickley, simply because I'm plan on doing a entire video about the Immanuel Quickley Isaiah Hartenstein pick and roll game as a whole, because it's so fun. But those are a few honorable mentions on my end. Did you have any?
So I had a different Thunder player. I think Isaiah Joe kind of fits into this category well. I'm sure you guys are noticing it's usually like a similar player archetype. I'm trying to look through my board here. Isaac Okoro.
Yeah.
I could see him doing that. I mean, if Jaime Jaquez continues at his current rate, if he keeps shooting the three ball the way he is, I feel like that changes a lot for Miami. Yeah, those are my guys. Okay.
All right. Well, I think we can go ahead and wrap up then. Guys, if you made it this far, thank you for listening. Seriously, like the feedback on the podcast has been great. You guys have left some amazing comments on YouTube. I check them relatively frequently. And on my channel with my videos, I get a good handful of, the occasional negative comments. But on the Media Pass channel, like, you guys have been super supportive, super positive. We really appreciate it. I send Matt pictures all the time of comments that people send us, and I'm like, dude, this is the best. So we really appreciate it. So keep saying nice things about us. Don't say anything negative. Please. But we will take constructive criticism as long as you leave a 5-star review. That's the only caveat here. Check out our stuff. Post on YouTube. Matt's putting out some awesome articles lately. He's killing the game, and then one of the best Twitter follows you can have if you're on NBA Twitter and a frequent browser of x.com. So that's at AlexHoops_ and at MattIsa15. So, that's going to do it for this episode. We're going to be back next Friday. I think we tried the Tuesday episodes. The numbers weren't great. So it's just going to be Fridays going forward. So appreciate you guys listening, and we'll see you in the next one.